Hello everyone, I'm back to do my second video on Crim Law, theft crimes. Now I have a mnemonic that's easy for me to memorize all the theft crimes. It's called Feller Brat. Might not be good for you, but it works for me, Feller Brat. F for false pretenses, E for embezzlement, L larceny, second L larceny by trick, E extortion, R receipt of stolen property, B burglary, R robbery, A arson, and then just basic theft. Move on to false pretenses. False pretenses rule: obtaining title to another's property using false statements of past or existing fact with intent to defraud. Specific intent crime. We have the word intent in there. The elements for this are obtaining title, obtaining ownership, not mere possession, by false statements. Must be intentional false statement. Oops, I always do that. There we go. Of past or existing fact. Misrepresentation regarding a future event is not sufficient. No future event here. Next element, intent to defraud, intent to steal. Side note, victim must be deceived or act in reliance on the false statement in passing title to defendant. Now in blue, I have the elements. And most of this on the side of the elements is for MBEs, things to watch out for MBEs, okay? But the original rule is up here at the top for all of my theft crimes. Let's move on to embezzlement. Fraudulent, this is the rule, fraudulent conversion of another's property by one in lawful possession. Now I'm going to break down the elements. Fraudulent conversion, defendant uses another's property beyond the scope or inconsistent with defendant's possessory rights. So depending on the MBE you get, they kind of trick you on some of these. Element 2, by one in lawful possession. The person, the defendant, must have lawful possession at the time of the conversion. He must be lawfully possessing whatever item they're talking about. Tricky. Now, a distinguish from larceny and embezzlement, I get these mixed up, so I put a distinguish between the two down here. Both involve obtaining property, yes they do, through misappropriation, yes, but circumstances of the taking differ. So how the taking is done. Embezzlement, conversion of property in defendant's rightful possession. He already has rightful possession of the property. He decides to I guess I could say convert the property, make a conversion into his own. Okay, so he already has rightful possession. They talk about this a lot with like people who have possession of the actual register and the money at a business. So there's a lot of MBEs on that. Now, larceny is taking property not in D's rightful possession, not in D's rightful possession. They just take it, okay? MBE on this, claim of right, not if property belongs to the embezzler. So if the property belongs to the embezzler in the MBE, he has a claim of right on it. He will not be held guilty of embezzlement because of that. Belongs to him already. Now we get to larceny. Rule is the trespassory taking, obtaining control or possession if defendant already had. Okay, so this one I kind of did different because larceny is such a big thing on the MBEs and on essays. I put in trespassory taking, first element, carrying away, second element, personal property of another, third, without consent, fourth, with the intent to steal. Okay, so there's 4 elements here and they're in blue. Now, when we talk about the trespassory taking, means obtaining control or possession of the item. If defendant already had possession at the time of the taking, I just read it, we know that it's not larceny and it's going to be embezzlement. Look into embezzlement. So write that up too on your essays, both. And carrying away. So even the slightest movement will suffice. I've seen plenty of MBEs on this where they have the intent at the beginning of the taking, they take it, and then they see their friend, it belongs to them, so they hand it over to their friend. Have they committed larceny? Yes. All of these elements are met, okay? Personal property of another, yes, it was a friend's property. It's always a watch that the person takes. Without consent, yes, he took it when the friend went to the bathroom, he decided to take the watch. With the intent to steal, yeah, before the taking, he intended to steal the watch and put it in his pocket. Then he saw his friend and he gives it back. So it must meet all the elements to be guilty of larceny. MBEs must be lost or misplaced. Larceny cannot arise for abandoned property. If they cannot find the owner, if they don't know where the owner's at, it's not going to be larceny. But if the true owner is known and D decides to keep the property, then larceny can arise. Larceny by trick is obtaining possession. Remember, it's possession, it's not title, possession of another's personal property using false statements of past or existing fact. Possession versus ownership is the distinguishing factor between larceny by trick and false pretenses. I haven't gone over I did go over false pretenses, which is title. They're taking title. Larceny by trick is using fraud or deceit, and it's taking possession only. Okay, so let's move on to our next one. The best way to learn these is do tons of MBEs on them. Extortion, threat of future harm to deprive an owner of his property, future harm. This one you're allowed to have future harm, and you could be held liable for extortion. Receiving stolen property, I do it as RSP. Here's the actual rule: receiving possession and control of personal property known to have been illegally obtained with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of her interest in it. Okay, this is a specific intent crime. The elements are receipt of possession and control of stolen property known to have been illegally obtained by another with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of his interest. Now, let me get a color here. I don't want black. I'll probably do red. Okay, so element, 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 element. So I set up my lecture to show you what the elements are, and the little side notes here are really for MBEs. A lot of these little side notes come from the MBE. So receipt of possession and control. Physical possession not required. Physical possession is not required. Defendant can have possession or control by designating the property location, so telling someone else, I know where the stolen property is at, or arranging to sell it for the original thief. MBEs, tons of MBEs on this part right here. Of stolen property. Property must have been stolen when D receives it. So when the defendant goes and tries to obtain it, it must have been stolen when he receives it. Known to have been illegally obtained by another, defendant must know or have some reason to know property is stolen with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of his interest. Now, MBEs, this is important. Beware of the sting operations. Tons of MBEs on this. If police officer and the true property owner know of or arranged defendant's receipt of property, it is not truly stolen. Defendant can be convicted of attempted receiving stolen property if she intended to receive property believing it to be stolen. So very tricky on MBEs. So let's see what our next one is here. So RSP comes on a lot in MBEs. Burglary. Burglary, in blue are my elements: breaking, entering, dwelling house of another during the nighttime with the intent to commit a felony therein, specific intent crime. Lots of MBEs on this. Modernly, there's any type of structure, any time of the day. So you need to know the difference. Common law burglary and modern burglary, which is the structures in any time of the day. Difference: common law burglary is a house of another and during the nighttime. You can't break into your own house. It's the house of another. So very tricky. Just know your elements really well and have them memorized. Do lots of MBEs on those. Robbery. So robbery, I see a lot on MBEs also. This is a larceny. Cannot be convicted of both robbery and larceny. So they try to say on MBEs, can defendant be convicted of larceny and robbery? No, they can't. It's one or the other. Trick on MBEs, okay? So in addition, the property has to be taken from the person. The property has to be taken from the person or presence of the owner. I get this wrong a lot on MBEs. Even if they're in the presence of the owner, it's considered a robbery. That's one of the elements. Through force or intimidation or placing the owner in fear. That's the difference between larceny and robbery. Has to be placing the owner in fear, okay? So if it has to do with a gun or holding a knife or, I don't know, pulling the purse from the person, all of that stuff, they consider that placing the owner in fear. And even though they don't actually touch the person, it is still considered the presence of the owner, So it is still considered a robbery. Arson is next. Okay, elements: malicious burning of the dwelling house of another. Malicious intent or extreme recklessness. I get that wrong a lot. It has to be you have the intent or extreme recklessness to burn, or malicious. This is the malicious act that they're trying to get you to see on MBEs. Burning requires some damage to structure caused by fire. Damage from smoke, water, or explosions is not sufficient at common law. So I'll tell you down here, in modern law it is. Of the dwelling house of another, you cannot burn your own structure. You cannot burn your own house. A lot of MBEs, it's not considered an arson and they will not be guilty of arson. Common law, no arson if you, the person who started the fire, owns the building. Modernly is most structures, and burning includes damages caused by explosives down here for modernly, not just fire. Now MBEs, damages must be charring or something more. This is on MBEs. It must be charring or something more. Discoloration, blackening, or other lesser damage is insufficient. Very important on MBEs. This part right here is, I would say, the exceptions. What they always test us on is mostly what they test you on for arson. So know that there has to be charring. Let's go to our next one. What is our next? I think it's just theft. Are we done? Yep, just theft. Basic theft, the illegal taking of another person's property. Make sure you throw that in there if you're doing a criminal law essay. So once again, this is my theft crimes video, number 2. Number 1 was on crimes against the person. You'll see murder and all of that in number 1. So my theft crimes, my mnemonic is fell or brat. These are all of them. And basically for theft crimes, I would know the elements really well because they come up on essays and they also lead to MBEs. If you really do a lot of essays and MBEs, you can see they kind of take their essays from the MBEs and then they place them back in the MBE. So it works all the same in one. You just really know your elements really well for theft crimes. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you on video number 3.